Hello, welcome to the Setting Fire to the Chains podcast. I am your host, Eli, and we are produced by Anushk. Today we are joined by Cate Denial. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am the bright, distinguished professor of American history here at Knox College.
Thank you for being here. It's great to have you on this podcast.
I think for today's podcast, we were kind of wanting to focus on kind of the second wave of people coming to Knox and Galesburg and their influence on abolition outside of the original founders. How exactly did that start in the second wave of kind of people coming in?
So, the original founders, so I'll talk about them just very briefly and then move. Okay. Yeah. So the original group of founders were men and women from upstate New York who came from a place that was known colloquially as the Burned Over District.
The original founders left upstate New York to found a town as a stop on the Underground Railroad. Knox College originally started as a manual labor college. The influx of new professors came at a time the college sought to expand into doing more academic work as a college. The 1840s and the professors that came in catalyzed this shift.
Originally, Knox College had a religious affiliation. Everybody who supported the college was either a Presbyterian or a Congregationalist. Both of those are Protestant denominations, but they disagreed about how to be a Protestant very vehemently.
Right.
And so in 1857, they decided that they were fighting so much that they were going to end up causing the college to implode. And so they took away the religious affiliation of the college. That's really unusual in liberal arts colleges and sort of amazingly forward-thinking. Even though they wouldn't have understood it in the way that we understand it now, right? It was a very forward-thinking decision to prevent the college from going under.
Knox is obviously an educational institution. I think there's a big emphasis you see on institutions now that, and I think throughout like the early histories of paying the finances. Mm-hmm. Tuition now is very expensive. It's not easy, which conveys, kind of a harder to get into. You need the money in ways in which at least I would feel kind of combats the early abolitionist ideas of being a stop on an Underground Railroad, like inviting in like African-American students for the first time. Mm-hmm. Do you see these institutional pressures kind of wearing away at abolitionist kind of ideology within the college?
So Knox was founded as a manual labor college, right? For men. So the assumption was that you would come and you would do the work of making the college run. And that would be the way that you paid your way through college. So that was in some ways quite an experiment, right? It was it had the potential to be egalitarian, right? In that it would allow some people to get a college education that wouldn't have been able to afford it if it wasn't for them being laborers for the college, right?
Right.
But it has always been about how do you keep the college afloat? Mm-hmm. And how you keep the college afloat has so much to do with the bigger context of what is going on in the United States economy.
The Civil War and World War II were instances that funding to the colleges ebbed. External factors came to play a role in tuition rates. Now the problem becomes that institutions are receiving less funding.
The portion of support that public institutions get from their states is just dwindling at a rate of knots, right?
Right.
And that has effects even for private institutions. It has effects on the kind of grant money that we can get and apply for. It has an effect upon people's general ability to pay tuition. It has an effect upon our ability to offer scholarships and fellowships to people, right?
Right.
I think that college is expensive, but college has never been cheap necessarily. But there has been an appetite to pay for it and make sure that it was accessible in some other periods of time that I don't think is as prevalent now.
Cate talked of a movie titled Those Were the Days that was based on Knox College. In the film, Knox College's name is replaced by an indigenous slur that was named for the Knox College's sports teams at the time. Once the college became aware that the name was a slur, they acted promptly, something Cate points to towards the continuation of social justice at Knox.
I think that the way the college responded once they understood it was an indigenous slur is a good example of that sort of thread of social justice continuing.
Right.
The president of the college in the early 1990s was alerted to the fact that it was a slur in the Pacific Northwest and immediately said, that's it, we're not going to use it anymore.
You mentioned in the 40s, there was a need to supply teachers. We're having to actually run a college. That's bringing in new people. In a moment like now that there is often teacher shortages, when there's lots of professor turnover within the college, do you see potentially a moment that kind of the same thing that's happening in the 40s could be happening now? We're having turnover. We're having to look outside of our tight little group and having to welcome in more people.
In some ways, yes, and in some ways, very much no. The job market for almost all academic positions in the United States is awful, as in there's way too many people who are qualified and way too few jobs.
Right.
So it's not a teacher shortage in the same way as it was in the 1840s, right? However, bringing people in from outside the community, from outside Illinois, from outside the United States. I am not from the United States, right?
Right.
That I think that is only to the better of the college, right? That strengthens the college. It makes us a better place with more diversity of viewpoints and politics and ideas. So I think that we are searching for a diversity of people and ideas and thoughts and approaches to teaching that the people in the 1840s would have had a conniption about, right?
Yeah.
They would have just absolutely fallen off their chairs to imagine. I mean, for instance, I am a single queer woman from Britain who is not married, right? Who is a professor. I mean, like, my very identity would cause them to have a conniption, right?
Right.
So, and so multiply that by everybody on campus, right? And this would be a place where they would not recognize the people who are professors now, right? They would not have thought that we had the authority or the skills or the ability to be professors. And yet, in some ways, we are embodying exactly the things that they wanted for this place.
Right. Yeah, I think, context is important. The time they're working in an abolition is very different to what we are in now. And I think you're right. They would absolutely keel over dead if they looked at the, makeup of the college. But this is, in a way, what they wanted. It's just our context has shifted so much. Yeah, I think that really does put in perspective the way that their kind of ideology has continued. And I think any ideology from that time period, you can't directly adapt it, but I think it has to morph and change. And maybe that is like dropping the religious aspects, allowing for that to happen.
Right.
And not standing in the way.
Right.
Potentially one of the more laudable things that Knox can do and administration can do. Yeah. That is it for today's episode. Thank you, Cate, so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I had a really good time.
Thank you all for listening. This has been the Setting Fire to the Chains podcast, hosted by me, Eli, and produced by Anushk.